Good day, everybody. Welcome to Canadian music in the 80s and 90s and more. Thanks for watching. Um, Please subscribe to the YouTube channel if you like what you see. Um, I'm very happy to be joined by Shane Guse. Shane is, as far as I know, he's a fiddle player. Do you play more instruments?
I do, yeah. I play the fiddle, I play the mandolin, I play the guitar, just and sing obviously, but yeah.
Um, I'm getting to know you for Western Swing Authority. That's your band.
Yes.
And you guys play a real old-fashioned country music or Western music, I guess, that doesn't really get played a lot anymore. Well, at least that style anyway. How did you come about with that band? Like,
Well, I've loved that kind of music for a long time. I think it was my through my parents I kind of found it accidentally. My parents just always loved to dance, so they always had music that was good for dancing around and when they'd have parties and stuff. And there was a couple recordings of Merle Haggard's that Merle Haggard in the 70s did a tribute to Bob Wills
oh, really?
called My Tribute to the Best Damn Fiddle Player in the World. Uh, and so he re kind of revived Western swing music a little bit. He brought it to a lot of people that probably wouldn't have known it otherwise, myself included. And so through that, I sort of discovered. I mean, I was just a little kid, but I discovered Merle Haggard, and then later later on when I was looking a little closer, I was like, well, yeah, Merle's a great songwriter, but these weren't his songs. Where did he find those? And then through that, I found the old Bob Wills recordings, Milton Brown, Spade Cooley, and then I found Asleep at the Wheel, and then that
Mm,
was it. I was hooked. So I've always kind of liked this music just because I love the feel of it. I love swing stuff, so I love that. Obviously, fiddle is really prevalent in it, so it's great for me. But the fiddle played a different type of role. It wasn't like old time tunes or anything like
yeah.
that. It was had just a different role. Lots of improvising. Just seemed really fun. And then I just kept digging, looking for more bands, and uh, eventually a friend of mine turned me on to the Time Jumpers, and this would have been in 2009, I guess, early 2009, and brought me a DVD of them. They did a PBS special on them, and I was watching the DVD, as I mentioned to you earlier, I would lament a lot about the fact that there weren't any bands up here that were playing that music,
Yeah.
and it drag because I would love to play that kind of music, and I was complaining to Stacy about it, and she's like, "Well, why don't you just start your own?" And so I thought, why don't we just start our own? So I sent out a message to a bunch of people that I thought would be into it, and the next morning we had a band. That's how it started.
Do you find you can take almost any song and do it in that style?
You could. I mean, Western swing is it's a unique music because it's such a fusion of all these different
Yeah.
styles. I mean, when it started in the 30s and 40s, it was, they were taking the pop music of the day, which was
Mm,
really just swing music, big band swing, and infusing it together with this string band music that had fiddles and banjos, and then incorporating some blues and some uh, mariachi and polka music. It's sort of all these different things all coming together. So it's like swing and blues and jazz and country and polka and all this different stuff all smushed together. So you can do whatever you want, like because you can sort of fit it into that hole, and then it's just how you approach it.
and I've noticed the way you and Stacy, who is your wife, is in the band as well. The vocals really do stand out a lot in this style of music. Like it's got a real different kind of vocal style.
Oh, thanks. It does. I mean, there's lots of great singers in the history of Western swing music, and even in modern day Western swing music. I like to think that Stacy is. I mean, Stacy is a really a phenomenal vocalist, and so I do kind of, she's a bit of our secret weapon. I always say it's like, well, the
Right.
band's good, but we put her singing in front of the band, it's really good.
So who are the guys in your band, if you don't mind going through them, and what do
I
they
don't
play?
mind at all. No,
Yeah.
so on the drums we have Jimmy Boudreau, on the bass Matthew Lima, playing twin fiddle with me is Dan Howlett, and then Paul Chapman on guitar and Ed Ringwald playing steel guitar. Ed also known as Pee Wee Charles. Some people know him as Pee Wee Charles, and then Stacy and myself.
It's a great mix. I do like the double fiddle as well. It's just you guys can really play off each other, and I think it comes off well.
Yeah.
And it shows how good you guys are profound at your instruments, obviously. Um, so how many albums do you have out now? I know you have a new one out coming
We have
out,
a
or is
new
it
one
out?
out, which is the new one is our fifth
Oh, okay.
album.
Wow.
So in 2010, I think we did our first album, and really it was more or less an experiment. A friend in town here offered up some studio space. We went in for an afternoon and just to see what would happen, and we just played a bunch of the songs that we've been playing at the house gig that we were doing, and then we were like, well, this actually turned out pretty well. So we ended up putting it out. It was all cover tunes, and then after that we started writing our own, and then we started doing mixes of originals and classic tunes, and that's what we still do now. So again, it's definitely heavier on the original material now than maybe it was in those first couple albums, but yeah, and it's the fifth one just came out not quite a month ago. So on February 9th it just came out. So it's brand spanking new.
So what are the plans? Are you going on the road? Are you doing some
Yeah,
gigs?
we've done a bunch of gigs just in the last month when the album came out at the beginning of February, and we did a bunch of gigs in and around Ontario here, and then
Mhm,
Stacey and I were in Austin, Texas for about 4 or 5 days as well, doing some promo stuff for there at an event called the Ameripolitans,
mhm.
and now it's a little quieter now, but then it does ramp up again in another month or so, and we'll start playing some more shows, and uh, and then there's radio and media and all the things that you do when you're promoting a new record. So the idea is we just want to get it in the ears of as many people as we possibly can, so that we can hopefully find some new Western Swing fans along the way.
Hopefully we can get you down to the Maritimes sometime for sure.
I would love that.
That'd be awesome. What was it like being down in Texas? Because I would imagine Texas would be very responsive to what you're doing.
Yeah, it's just funny. The one night we were playing and there was a group of people all standing around. I said, "Oh, we'll do stay all night," and we were sort of sitting in with some different people, and well, if I played that song up here, people were like, "Oh, cool song," but down there they know every word.
Yeah.
It's like it's because it's classic Western swing, Bob Wills tune, and so yeah, down there it is kind of where the music came from, right in the southern U.S. and Texas and Oklahoma, and
Yeah.
so it's still a fairly prevalent part of the musical tradition down there.
Mhm.
Um, so I like to think that we're trying to spread it a little bit so that it's not just
Right.
there, because at one point it was quite, it was all over the place. And uh, and now there are Western swing bands. There's Western swing bands in Canada. There's Western swing bands in Europe. All throughout the U.S., not just in Texas and Oklahoma, but in California. There's some great bands. There's some on the Northeast as well, and coming out of Nashville, there's some. So it's getting around.
I can see the Texas thing because I've always kind of heard a bit of that in George Strait's early music.
George Strait would be one of those people that would be heavily influenced by Western swing music. In fact, he's actually cut a lot of songs that were covers of old Western swing tunes. So he did Right or Wrong is a Western swing tune. Take Me Back to Tulsa. He's done Milk Cow Blues. He's done, boy, there's a bunch. He's definitely, and when he started out,
Hmm.
he would sometimes open shows for Asleep at the Wheel, who
Oh,
is sort
right.
of, they're like the granddaddy of all Western swing bands. And now when he plays, if anytime he can, he'll have them opening for him to kind of just to return the favor. But those two bands are quite, uh,
Yeah.
their history is intertwined.
Yeah, because I can in the fiddle part of All My Exes Live in Texas kind of seems a little bit Western swingish to me for sure.
Totally. In fact, the guy that plays fiddle on that is Johnny Gimbel, who was one of the greatest fiddlers of all time, and was one of the Texas Playboys. Played with Bob
Oh,
Wills
really?
himself. Yeah, he was one of the guys that sort of helped create the style.
Awesome. Yeah, you can definitely hear it in them. Now another place where I know you from, you were quite a for hire musician over the years. Can you give me
Yeah.
a little brief? I know it's probably a long list. Can you list some of the people that you had the honor of recording and touring with, or
Oh
playing
man.
gigs with?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot. Um, but I mean, I'll start with the people that I probably toured with the most. Recently with Dean Brody, Jason McCoy. I was on the road for years with George Canyon, um, Jason Blaine, Derek Rattan. I've done some things, in conjunction with some of these other guys, some TV things with Colin James and Richard Marks and boy, and just it's funny. The Canadian music scene is a lot smaller than you might think, and so you come across a lot of people. With Western Swing Authority too, we've done a lot of gigs where we act as the band for people if it's like an award show or something like that, or the Legend Show at CCMAs, where the different artists are coming in. So and through that, we've played with oh man, everybody under the sun: Michelle Wright, Patricia Conroy, and Jade Eagleson, and boy, just the list is long. Yeah.
Now, in terms of Western Swing Authority, are you guys always open to like having guest musicians pop in with you on stage or even recording?
We have done that in the past for sure. Like, so we did an album called Big Deal, and that entire album was really based on that. We did the recordings, and in every song we brought in a guest, and the guest was sometimes it was somebody that we'd worked with in the past, sometimes it was somebody that heavily influenced us. We were really fortunate when I think about it. We got Ray Benson from Asleep at the Wheel to come and do a song with us. Stacey did a song with Jane Monheit, who was like a crazy jazz singer from. Uh, and then we had guys like George Canyon on the album and Jason McCoy, Russell DeCarl from Prairie Oyster. It was
Oh yeah.
it's really cool. It was very fun album to make, and yeah, I'm really proud of it actually. It was really neat just to think that all those people would actually take the time and do it.
So you just reminded me of Prairie Oyster. That's a band I really miss because
Yeah,
they were such a good fight for the traditional country music, and they had such a slick sound. Like they sounded like something that could have come out back in the 50s, like it was
totally.
just. And
Totally. Well, they
Russ,
kind of started out as, from what I understand, they started out as a Western swing band. And that was sort of their roots at the beginning of that band. And Russell DeCarl still, I mean, if you haven't checked out any of his stuff that he's releasing now, it's so good. It's like he's just kind
yeah.
of one of the coolest guys in music. He just really is.
Well, I saw him play with Whiskey Jack at a Stompin' Tom birthday party,
Yeah,
and he sat in with Whiskey Jack, and he's still got the vocals, and
sure
he's
does.
just an amazing talent. Um,
Yeah.
so could you take me back to when you first started playing music? Like what got you started? Like,
Yeah, sure. I started out, I guess I got into the fiddle as mostly because of my grandfather initially. He loved fiddle
mm,
music, and he didn't play a lot, but he loved it. And he was a step dancer. He was a farmer by trade, but he also was a step dancer. And he kind of had the title of being the guy that won, not kind of, he did, won the Canadian Open. He was the first guy to win it the year that they had it. So that was sort of
mhm.
so as a result, he got invited to go and do a number of guest appearances on the Don Messer show. So
Okay.
they would fly him out the east, and sometimes him and my uncle would go and they would perform on the show. And so he just loved fiddle music, and there's always be fiddle players there. They'd be kind of on their way sometime to Shelburne for the fiddle contest or whatever. They'd stop in at the farm, and there would always just be fiddle music there all the time. And so that got me into it. That made me want to play the fiddle, and so I'd seen a lot of great fiddle players, and I just wanted to do that. So that's what got me going into it. And then after my grandfather passed, my dad and my sister, I played in a family band for a number of years, and we toured all over the place, like all over the place, and then that until well for many years I did that. And then I started, when I was old enough, and sometimes even when I wasn't, I started playing in the clubs and the bars with different bands, and uh, and then eventually got called for a couple of recording artist gigs, and through and some session work, And I think some of the earliest people I probably worked with would have been John Landry, and Lace when Lace first formed,
Okay.
and then eventually Jason McCoy, who I still play with today. Um, and it just sort of, I just have been very fortunate, the Jason, and it went to George, and then it was just lots of different things. I think joining George's band was a big one for me. It changed a lot of things for me because he was so busy at that time. He did so many
Yeah.
things. It was everywhere, and we were doing tons of TV, and so it just sort of put me in front of a lot of people, and it really, really boosted things for me.
With all the playing, like, because I've seen through my friend Marshall Dane, who you played with,
Yep.
I've seen the way um the for hire musicians really do have to be on their toes to play just about anything at the drop of a hat. Like, would you say
Yep.
all those early experiences really prepared you for that kind of thing?
Absolutely. You know what? And I would say there's two people in particular that I think of in that regard. One is a country singer who ended up being a bar owner not far from here, a guy by the name of Paul Weber.
Mhm.
And he was a country singer and had some hits throughout the '80s. He was quite popular, and when he got off the road, he moved to Maryhill and purchased the Commercial Tavern, and he ran the Commercial Tavern, and that's when I met him, and I played with him for many nights. And I think a lot of me being able to play country music has a lot to do with Paul, because he didn't, there was no set list. I didn't know what was going to happen when I got
Yeah.
there. He just started calling tunes. Sometimes he wouldn't call a tune, you just start it, and then you'd be like, what key? Okay. And boy, did I learn a ton. And then there's another guy in town here that's very similar experience, um, by the name of Fred Hale, who, again, who hired me. And I always tell this story to people that I'm talking to, if they're students or whatever that are wanting to learn about improvising. And I remember going and I learned all these songs. I lifted all the songs on us. He sent me a set list, and I lifted all the songs. And we got to the gig, and I played the solo off the record, and he went, "Yeah, man, that was great. Take another one." And I was like, "Whoa, I wasn't expecting that, right?" And then it was like, "Okay, note to self, you gotta learn how to do this." And so, and yeah, those gigs, where you're playing 3-4 hours, a night, like, boy, Paul, sometimes the first set would be 2 hours long. So it was, you played a lot of music, and you just got thrown out there again and again and again, and that was the best thing ever, to learn, because you just you learned, and you learned quick. You were in the moment. You had no choice.
You mentioned Shelburne. Did you play there a lot? The Fiddle Festival up there?
You know what? I didn't. I went to the fiddle contest when I was a kid, but on not because I started out as a step dancer as well before fiddle, and so I went a lot to those contests. And by the
Yeah.
time I was really getting to the point where I would compete as a fiddler, we were already starting to perform as a family, so I didn't go to a lot of those contests. We actually performed at Shelburne on the show on the Friday or Saturday night. I forget which it was, but I never competed in it. I never competed at that contest. Some others, but never that one.
I haven't been back to Ontario in a little while, but is that still going on every year, the Shelburne Fiddle Contest?
It is. It's the contest scene is not, unfortunately, it's not what it once was, right?
Right.
It's not as huge as they once were. Where
Yeah.
there, when I was a kid, boy, there was a contest every weekend somewhere. If you were
Yeah.
willing to drive there, you could find a fiddle contest every weekend, and that's what a lot of people did. Like all summer long, just go from one to the next to the next to the next to the next, and compete all summer long. And obviously, if you're winning and you're making for some people that was their summer job. Uh, but yeah, I don't find that there are as many now. Unfortunately, a lot of still some of the main ones are still going,
Right.
uh, and I don't think it'll ever go away. But and hopefully it'll ebb and flow, right? Like, see, it was
Yeah.
so hugely popular, and it's sort of waned a little bit. But I'm hopeful that it will come back again, because it was what is a great experience as a kid. Like, I never liked the competition part of it. I didn't
Yeah.
like competing so much, but I loved being in an atmosphere where I, as a kid, was around all these other kids that were doing the same thing as me. So you could play music together, and it was
Right.
fun. It's really fun.
And what are your plans for um what are your plans for the band coming up in the future? You just gonna keep recording and doing what you
I,
can, or
yeah, I mean, we want to keep recording. We want to, we want to expand our reach, our touring. With the size of the band, that is kind of, it's like I love it because
yeah,
musically it's so fun and you can do so many things. But it does make it harder for touring just because the economics of touring,
right,
uh, it's difficult when you have that many people in your band. So, but that is the goal, is to start spreading out more. I mean, we have done some traveling, but it's been very specific. If like we've been
right.
to the west, but only in a couple of spots, and it usually has something to do with CCMAs or an event that would take us there. But we haven't toured straight through, and I would like to do that. Same thing with, in the United States, we've sort of gone in and done little pockets, but
Hmm.
I would, as the band gets to be more well known, there's just more opportunities, and I want to start to spread us out a little bit further, and get, again, you just want to you want to play for as many people as you can.
Are you still gonna keep doing being a for hire player as well?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I like to think you can do it all. Like, and why not?
Yeah,
I love doing that, right? I love the bands that I play with, that I've gotten to play with in the past. Like, it's been, again, great experiences, great music. I've made a ton of lifelong friends. I mean, when you
hmm,
tour with a band on the road for a long period of time, you're like family. You sometimes more about those people than you do your own family,
yeah.
because you are living in a confined space as you travel together. And Yeah, some of my best friends in the world are people that I met touring. And so, yeah, I don't think I will ever stop doing that. And I think it keeps you on your toes. You're always, because again, it's those scenarios where you can prepare and prepare and prepare, and all you want, but it's inevitable that you're going to get to the gig and something's going to happen where it'll be like, oh, that's going to change,
Yeah.
and you kind of roll with it. And I think with my background and some of the people that I've played with, I mean, George was great for that. Boy, George was a great off the cuff guy. Jason McCoy, same thing. He's just like so quick.
Yeah.
And he'll just switch gears on you and be like, you're on, and you go. And for me, I love that, because musically, you just, every once, it just really lets you kind of stretch out a little bit, and it's a little bit more challenging, and just because you don't really always know what's going to happen, and I kind of like that.
And I guess it probably develops a lot of good connections you never know you'll run into along the way as well.
Oh, exactly. Again, like I think of guys like George and Jason and Dean. Dean, over these last 10 years, I've been playing with Dean. Um, yeah, I've met, again, not just musicians, but people within the
Right.
industry that I've come to know quite well, because I've met them for the last 25
Years.
years in different scenarios, right? And maybe I'm playing with a different artist, but I keep coming across these same people. And so it's great, because you're right, you do. And again, the music world is much smaller than you might think,
Right.
and you see a lot of the same people. But so events like CCMAs and CMA Ontario, and where you are going, and all the industry people kind of converge in one spot. It's like, you can't get 5 steps without bumping into somebody that, oh, hey, because you haven't seen them in a little while, and so it's like old home week. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, it's well, old home week here on the island is like that. But I mean, it's like the same thing here. The musician family here on PEI alone is so close knit. Everybody knows everybody in the industry. I imagine it's the same where you are too.
There
Um,
is.
could you tell me some of the heroes you've gotten to bump into on your travels and on your work?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, for me, obviously, there's some fiddle heroes that I've gotten to meet and play with. One in particular that it's kind of sticks out is Buddy Spiker, which, if you weren't a fiddle player, you maybe would know who Buddy Spiker was, but you'd have heard him. He's one of the most recorded fiddlers ever. So if you think of a song like Amarillo by Morning and
Oh,
that is Buddy Spiker, and a
beautiful.
million other records just like it. And so I met him in the early '90s. I went to a Mark O'Connor fiddle camp,
Okay.
and and I went there because it was kind of just like this spot where you could go and kind of all your fiddle heroes were there, and
Yeah.
you could sit and take classes with them and whatever, and really hit it off with Buddy in particular. And so he just kept coming into my life again and again. So we saw him a few times, a couple of those different camps, and then went down. Anytime I was in Nashville, I would be like, "Oh, I wonder if we can go see Buddy play, or maybe I can get an hour to sit down with Buddy and get him to show me some things."
Yeah.
And he would always, anytime I ever asked, he was so gracious and willing to do that. And then he played at my sister's wedding.
Oh
he,
wow. That's awesome.
um, and then on the Big Deal album, he actually plays on that album as well. There's an instrumental, and Buddy is a guest on that, which for me was kind of awesome, just because I can say I have a recording of me and Buddy Spiker together, which is pretty cool. And then Ray Benson, I mentioned Asleep at the Wheel again. I've been a
Hmm.
huge Wheel fan forever. So getting to meet Ray and inevitably record a song with him was huge. I mean, initially I met him in 2015, and we were down for this Ameripolitan again, and we were playing at the Paramount Theater, and we walked off stage, and Chappie was like, he had walked off one side of the stage, I walked off the other, and he came running back the other way. He goes, "You gotta come back here." He says, "I walked off stage and Ray Benson was standing in the wings. He wants to talk to you." So which, so that was kind of, it didn't get much better than that for me. And then so got to meet Ray, and then sort of kept in contact, and eventually made that recording together. We went to see the Time Jumpers. Remember the first time we went to see the Time Jumpers? um we went, and Jason Blaine, we
Hmm.
went together. So Jason and Amy and Stacy and I went, and Jason knew the owner of the bar, Third and Lindsley, and he said, we should go. Maybe we'll go back and meet the band on the break. Well, prior to this, I had gone. I wasn't sure. I had looked on their website, and it didn't say if they were going to be there. This was in January, and I thought
Right.
maybe they're in January, so I better check. And I was Facebook friends with Andy Reese, who I didn't know, but I was just Facebook friends with him,
Yeah.
and he plays guitar for the Jumpers, and so I sent him a message, just on a whim. I was like, "Hey, you don't know me, but we're coming down, and one of the reasons we're coming down is to see you guys, because you've been a big influence on us. So I just want to make sure you're there." And he sent back, and he goes, "Yeah, yep, we're there. The only time we're off is Christmas and New Year's." So I was like, "Okay, great." And then he sent me another message. He goes, "Hey, aren't you in the Western Swing Authority?" And I was just like, "What? You know who we are?" And he's like, "Yeah, man, I love your band." So when we went backstage, he knew us right away, and then he was like, "Hey, well, come on, I'll take you around and introduce you to everybody." So all the guys in the band, of course, that's when Vince Gill was in the band as well.
Oh
So
wow.
hang out with those guys, and then they ended up pulling Stacy up to sing a song in the second half. And so again, like these kind of surreal moments. We got called to play a birthday party for Bob Doyle, and Garth Brooks and Trisha Yearwood and Steve Warner were all
Wow.
there, and we're the band. And it's in like like it's not a big place. Like it was a couple hundred people maybe at this party, if that. And and boy, they were like the best audience ever, because again, they got the music. They knew exactly what we were doing. They knew the Western Swing music. But talk about surreal when you go and when you're looking on the audience, and Garth Brooks is watching you play.
Yeah.
That's weird.
I
It
can't imagine what that might be like, but I
was
mean
weird,
that's
but it was awesome. But it was weird.
but that's the things that happen like as when you have a long career like you've had so far, and you don't just limit yourself to just the band. You stretch out as far as you can with as many people and play many different styles of music as well. Like, I mean, that
Yeah.
must really help you a lot. I know whenever I go to a Kaylee here in the Maritimes,
Yeah.
um, every band I've seen at a Kaylee has a fiddle player.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and the one fiddle player I see, I forgot his name, but he's been around for years. Like, I think he played with Stompin' Tom, Harry Hibbs back in Ontario.
Oh yeah.
I'll get his name for you and send it to you. You probably heard of him, but
Oh, Richard.
they all seem to know these same classics, like
Yeah.
Canadian fiddle classics, like Big John McNeil,
Yes.
Maple
There's
Sugar.
certain tunes that just it doesn't, despite the stylistic approach, because again, fiddle music is very different depending on where you are geographically. So the way
Yeah,
people play in, Cape Breton or on the east coast of Canada is very different than the way people play in Ontario
yeah,
versus even what people play in like Manitoba or Alberta. And then when you get into the States, it's even more so. Like Texas style is so different
yeah,
than Kentucky bluegrass. There's all these different regional dialects of fiddle, but
yeah,
there are certain tunes that it doesn't matter the dialect. They are so popular that they've just found a home in every one of them. And maybe it's a little different approach, but it's like, oh yeah, that's Big John McNeil, or that's St. Anne's Reel, or that's
yeah.
it's like can't miss it.
Those are the songs you just have to know to be a fiddle player.
Well, I think you just do. Obviously there's so many tunes that even as a fiddle player, I can't remember them all. I can't remember the
Yeah,
names of them. People say, "Do you know this song?" And I'm like, I might. Can you hum it a little bit?" And then they'll hum it. I'm like, "Oh yeah, I do know that tune."
I do know.
And but I didn't know what it was called, or maybe that what they called it is a different name than what I know it as. That happens a lot too. Um, so, but there's certain tunes that people, especially if they're fans of fiddle music, they just know it, and so that becomes the first tune that people ask you. They ask you to play, and so those are the tunes you just play the most, and you just never forget them. And then of course there's the Orange Blossom Special, The Devil Went Down to Georgia, which even
Right,
anybody that they don't know fiddle music, they usually know those two. So if they see it with a fiddle in your
right.
hand, those are the songs that they ask you to play. So once you start, you're playing those ones for forever.
Did you get excited as a fiddle player in the 90s when there was a big explosion of Canadian fiddle players like Natalie McMaster and Ashley McIsaac made it to the forefront?
Absolutely. Yes, I loved it. Um, yeah, I was just listening to one of Natalie's albums the other day. Um, yeah, I mean, just killer players and just like, amazing players and so cool to see that music become that popular, right? It's because I mean I knew it, but then all of a sudden it was like it was the cool thing, and then it's like, oh, to me it was like, oh, I've been hearing this for years, right? But it's
Yeah,
but to see that explosion of popularity was awesome, yeah.
it was nice to see it on like on in mainstream as well. Like it was nice to see a guy like McIsaac really bring that to mainstream alternative music back in the 90s and hear it on alternative radio stations.
I think like when I was going to university and it was like I'd go to the bar, the university bar, you'd hear Ashley McIsaac in the bar at the
Yeah,
university. That was not, again, it was just like, what is happening? This is a great.
yeah,
So yeah, that's awesome. And I feel like there's always going to be um there'll be those kind of ebbs and flows again, right? Where it's like, oh,
yeah.
somebody pops out and there I think it was just a combination of just fantastic musicians and just kind of a little bit of timing where it was the popular thing and and they were ready to go. And it was and did great things.
And
Great
then
things.
even bands like Spirit of the West and Great Big Sea who got big as well. Must have done a
Absolutely.
lot for your style of playing and your style of music as well.
Sure. Well, I can't tell you how many great big sea songs I've played over the years for sure. Playing in pubs and whatnot, which is kind of neat because I've actually, in recent years, I've gotten to play some of those songs with Alan Doyle himself, which is kind of neat, when you're like, well, I've been playing these songs, do you know this one? I'm like, yeah, I know it. I've been playing it in the pubs for years. And so it's like, but to actually play it with the guy himself was pretty cool. Yeah.
I can't thank you enough for joining me, but the one thing I got to bring up is I remember when I saw you with George Canyon in Brampton a few years ago.
Yeah.
I guess George was doing that Classics 2 tour of he did two
Yes.
albums of classics and he sang the Green Green Grass of Home and I just remember you told him after he sang it that it was real nice, but you got the lyrics wrong. And I was like, he's gonna sing Stompin' Tom's version, isn't he? And you did, and I couldn't
And I
stop
did.
laughing.
Yeah.
I was like, he knows Stompin' Tom's lyrics for that song, and I just started laughing. I was like, yes.
Well, it's always good to know all your options, right?
For sure, for sure. I can't thank you enough again for joining me. all the best with Western Swing Authority. I hope you make it out here someday because I think you'd really fit in.
I think we would too. I would love to come out and just tour all over the East would be fantastic. And definitely hit Charlottetown. It would be that would be great.
Oh,
That would,
it'd be awesome to see you here because I could see you at a festival of some kind here, like maybe something like that, or
yeah.
even just playing at the trailside here in Charlottetown. I think you'd fit right in, and then probably be a lot of people come and join you.
Well, sounds good. Let's make it happen. I'm
Yeah,
in.
let's do it. All right. Thanks for joining me, Shane. I really appreciate it.
All right, thanks so much.
Take care.